Imagine a threat so pervasive, it's actually been called the most persistent and lethal in the homeland. It's a danger that has, well, quietly infiltrated the very institutions designed to protect us.
Right.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into an issue that really cuts to the core of American security and, frankly, trust. We're uncovering a reality maybe far more insidious than many realize.
Yeah, and this deep dive, it pulls from a whole stack of powerful sources. We're talking comprehensive policy blueprints from leading think tanks like the Center for American Progress and the McCain Institute.
Hmm.
And alongside those, investigative reports from organizations like the Center for Public Integrity, the Intercept, the FBI, among others.
Quite a list.
Yeah. Together, they paint a vivid and honestly often alarming picture of white supremacist violence right here in the U.S., and its deeply concerning connections to our law enforcement and military.
So our mission today is to really unpack the historical roots, the current, ever-evolving tactics, and also the proposed solutions for confronting this violence.
Yeah.
We're putting a particular spotlight on how these extremist ideologies have permeated our public service institutions, offering you a kind of shortcut to truly understand the urgency of this threat and what our sources suggest we can actually do to address it.
Let's get into it.
So let's start by digging into the enduring nature of this threat. Our sources make it abundantly clear that white supremacist violence isn't some recent phenomenon. It actually predates the nation's founding.
Way back.
Yeah, it's woven into the fabric of historical violence against people of color. Think about the forced removal of Native Americans, the enslavement of black people, exclusionary immigration laws.
It's a long history.
It is. And what's particularly striking is how narratives from, say, the Reconstruction era, like the whole race war doctrine, which, falsely claimed white Americans were in danger of genocide by black Americans, those are deeply connected to the core tenets of today's movement.
And that historical thread, it reveals a really important insight, doesn't it? This isn't just an old problem, it's constantly shape-shifting.
Right.
We saw a notable resurgence of white supremacist violence post-civil rights era, and especially after President Barack Obama's election. Our sources highlight how extremists actively capitalized on the election of the first African-American president to really fuel their recruiting.
Exploiting the moment.
Totally. And they skillfully exploited economic distress, pushing this baseless narrative that, immigrants were to blame. This period also saw the mainstreaming of racist disinformation, like the completely fictional birther conspiracy.
Which gained way too much traction.
It did. And what's truly unsettling is how today's movement is so heavily rooted in the white genocide conspiracy theory. This idea that the white race is somehow endangered by demographic shifts, immigration, interracial relationships.
And that ideology doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all.
Right?
It often overlaps with misogyny, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories like the Zionist occupation government, the idea that Jewish people secretly control the U.S. government, and also accelerationism, which actively encourages societal disorder to spark a coming race war. Yeah, and there's even a disturbing overlap with QAnon, which itself is built on long-standing anti-Semitic tropes. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's October 2020 threat assessment, it didn't mince words. It identified racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, particularly white supremacists, as, quote, the most persistent and lethal threat in the homeland.
That's a direct quote. Stark.
Very stark. And the Anti-Defamation League provides a statistic that just stops you in your tracks. Over the past decade, white supremacists have been responsible for a staggering 58% of all extremist-related murders.
58%.
Yeah, targeting Black, Hispanic, Asian, Jewish, Muslim, and Sikh communities specifically.
That's a truly sobering statistic. Really underscores the urgency of understanding how these groups operate today, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Our sources lay out this wide range of tactics white supremacists use to recruit, organize, fund, and ultimately carry out their violence. The core insight here seems to be that any effective policy solution, it can't just be a blunt instrument.
No, exactly.
It has to be precisely calibrated to directly address these specific and often evolving methods.
Absolutely. And what's particularly revealing is their deep dominance online and their global reach. White supremacists use both mainstream and sort of niche platforms to spread their narratives, recruit, organize, fundraise.
All of it online.
A huge amount of it. And what's insidious is how they often introduce white supremacy and misogyny through what seem like innocuous jokes, right? Which are then amplified by algorithms, slowly pushing users toward more extreme content. We've seen this in action with engagement in QAnon communities and how they capitalized on anti-government sentiments during, say, the COVID-19 mask mandates.
Right, tapping into existing frustration.
Exactly. Online platforms are also crucial for planning. Initial investigations into the January 6th insurrection, for example, revealed discussions on public Facebook pages.
Public, wow.
Yeah. While more violent plans for events like the Unite the Right rally were hashed out on Discord, some online forums even gamify terror, quite literally scoring mass shooting deaths to encourage future attackers. It's horrifying.
That's just unbelievable. And funding, how does that work online?
Well, they leverage everything. Crowdfunding, online payment sites, peer-to-peer transfers, even cryptocurrencies, which makes it incredibly difficult to track.
That weaponization of everyday online tools is truly a chilling development. But like you said, this isn't just a domestic issue, is it? The sources highlight a strong international connection.
Indeed. Yeah, to put this in a broader context, the movement is highly transnational. Online spaces make borders almost irrelevant, you know?
Right.
Our data shows that at least 1/3 of violent white supremacist extremists since 2011 were inspired by foreign perpetrators.
1/3.
Yeah. Think of the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand, directly inspired by Anders Breivik's manifesto from Norway.
I remember that connection.
And it goes both ways. Foreign state actors are involved. Groups like the Base and the Daily Stormer have operated from Russia. There are even reports of American white supremacists receiving tactical training in Ukraine.
Tactical training abroad.
Yes. And the FBI has even investigated potential foreign financial support for the January 6th insurrection, underscoring this global web.
So while the digital realm is clearly critical, these groups aren't exclusively online, right? They still operate in the physical world too.
That's a crucial point, yeah.
Yeah.
While online engagement is paramount, these groups absolutely still meet and train in person.
Like how?
For example, they exploited COVID-19 reopen demonstrations to push their propaganda. We see private militias routinely conducting paramilitary training. The national partisan movement even blends online outreach with informal in-person gatherings specifically to recruit youth.
Targeting younger people.
Directly. And groups like the Base conduct these in-depth recruit interviews covering everything from, like, bombings to communications. The Atomwaffen Division has hosted combat training camps.
Actual training camps.
Yes. And remember, the infamous plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, that was hatched at a physical in-person meeting. It's a blend of high-tech and, frankly, old-school methods, making them incredibly adaptable.
Okay, let's unpack one of the most chilling realities identified in our sources. This deep penetration of extremism, steeped in racist and anti-government convictions into our law enforcement and military institutions.
Yeah, this is serious.
This isn't just hypothetical. It's a fundamental challenge to the very systems sworn to protect us. And federal agencies, well, they've acknowledged this problem for years.
Which raises an important question. Why are military and veteran communities particular targets?
Right.
Well, white supremacists actively seek to recruit current and former military members because they bring tactical skills, combat experience, and, let's face it, credibility to the movement.
That makes sense, unfortunately.
Yeah, our sources show that individuals with military experience have been overrepresented in extremist communities for decades now. Veterans, in particular, can be vulnerable after service. They might be experiencing identity loss, a loss of social support, and they find ideologies that seem to address personal grievances appealing. A 2015 study, for instance, found that white all-volunteer force veterans held more negative views regarding Black Americans than the general civilian population.
Wow, that's concerning.
And the January 6th Capitol attack painfully underscored this. Veterans represented more than 15% of those charged in that event.
More than 15%.
Yeah. Now, while the U.S. Department of Defense has expressed commitment to ridding its ranks of extremism, our sources note that the true prevalence remains largely unknown, often due to inadequate reporting and screening shortfalls.
So it's not just veterans, though. What about active law enforcement? This seems like an even more direct threat to public trust, doesn't it?
It absolutely is. Our sources emphasize that white supremacist groups specifically target law enforcement. Why?
Yeah, why?
To, quote, anticipate law enforcement interest in and actions against them, and also to exploit any sympathetic views within the law enforcement community itself.
So they want intel and allies.
Basically, yes. And the FBI has actually been quietly investigating this for years. A classified 2015 counterterrorism policy guide explicitly noted that domestic terrorism investigations focused on militia extremists, white supremacist extremists, and sovereign citizen extremists often have identified active links to law enforcement officers.
Explicitly noted, not just hinted at.
Right. And going back even further, a heavily redacted 2006 FBI intelligence assessment warned of something called ghost skins.
Ghost skins.
Yeah, hate group members who don't overtly display their beliefs but covertly advance white supremacist causes from within law enforcement.
That concept of ghost skins is incredibly unsettling. Can you give us a sense of how widespread this issue might be based on, the documented incidents?
Yeah. Well, what's truly astonishing are the documented incidents and the kind of systemic gaps that highlight this problem. Since 2009, we've seen scandals in over 100 police departments in 49 states involving overtly racist emails, texts, or social media comments by officers.
Over 100 departments.
Yes. And consider this chilling detail. A 1991 U.S. District Court found a neo-Nazi gang operating within a Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, actively terrorizing Black and Latino residents.
Inside the department.
Inside. In Chicago, a police detective, who was rumored to be a KKK member, was prosecuted for torturing Black men. Institutional racism has also been historically and persistently found within the U.S. Border Patrol, often with little oversight for officers exhibiting racist behaviors.
It's deeply embedded in some cases.
It seems so. And following the January 6th attack, the Capitol Police suspended several officers, and investigations began in over a dozen other law enforcement agencies nationwide connected to that day.
That's a staggering list of incidents. What allows this infiltration to happen, structurally speaking? Is there something specific?
Well, to put this in a broader context, a major issue is the sheer lack of centralized recruitment standards across the, 18,000 U.S. law enforcement agencies.
18,000. Yeah, that's a lot of variation.
Exactly. This creates, as the sources say, ample opportunities for infiltration. Now, the First Amendment's freedom of association is often debated here, but Supreme Court precedent actually allows limits on employment for sensitive public sector jobs if membership interferes with official duties.
So there is some legal basis for action.
There is. And the FBI's own awareness of this threat is further evidenced by their silent hit protocol for watchlisted police officers. This protocol prevents officers from knowing they're under scrutiny in a domestic terrorism investigation. It's a clear acknowledgement of the deep concern within the Bureau itself.
A silent hit. That speaks volumes. And when we talk about the violence itself, firearms are clearly central to this threat.
They absolutely are. Firearms are increasingly the weapon of choice for white supremacists. A Center for American Progress analysis found that from 2010 to 2016, 56,130 hate crimes in the United States involved the use of a gun.
56,000.
Yes. And the Anti-Defamation League further reveals that a devastating 72% of people murdered by domestic extremists over the past decade were killed with guns.
72%. Just devastating.
It is. And this is compounded by legislative gaps that make these attacks even deadlier. For example, individuals with misdemeanor hate crime convictions are not prohibited from purchasing guns.
Even with a hate crime conviction.
A misdemeanor one, yes. Plus, the availability of ghost guns, these untraceable 80% receivers, allows individuals to bypass background checks entirely, making it nearly impossible to trace these weapons back.
So given the complexity and the just pervasive nature of this problem, what do our sources suggest can actually be done? Where's the consensus?
Well, what's truly illuminating from the blueprint we're examining, this joint effort from the Center for American Progress and McCain Institute, is the consensus that no single piece of legislation or executive action can fix this.
Right. No silver bullet.
Exactly. Instead, it demands a whole-of-government response, focusing on 5 interconnected policy areas. The key insight here is that this isn't about incremental tweaks. It's about a fundamental, coordinated shift across the board.
Okay, let's unpack those recommendations, starting with executive leadership and accountability. What's the core message there?
So the blueprint really stresses that the executive branch has to prioritize this threat from the top down. This means requiring federal departments across the government think justice, education, labor, health, and human services to develop comprehensive inter-office strategies.
Not just law enforcement.
Not just law enforcement, covering everything from prevention and public health approaches to investigation, including cyber safety and countering misinformation. It's also about allocating federal resources that truly match the scale of the threat.
Right. Putting money where the mouth is.
Precisely. And enhancing cooperation with state, local, and tribal law enforcement through existing fusion centers, those collaborative hubs where various agencies share threat intelligence. A really crucial step would be establishing a funded and staffed lead executive branch task force for coordination and accountability.
Someone in charge.
Yeah, and vitally, it calls for establishing and enforcing clear standards of conduct for the entire federal workforce, including defining prohibited white supremacist activities and mandating tailored training on extremist recruitment tactics and, importantly, how to report it.
That comprehensive, coordinated approach sounds essential. And you mentioned data gaps earlier. To truly understand the problem, we need better data, don't we?
Exactly. That's been a significant hurdle. The lack of comprehensive and detailed data has really hindered targeted strategies. So another core recommendation is to improve data collection, research, and reporting.
What kind of research?
The blueprint proposes conducting quality research on vital topics like the specific recruiting methods of violent white supremacist actors, effective community-led prevention strategies, the nature of racism within law enforcement, and the often overlooked role of online platforms and algorithms in radicalization.
Getting specific.
Very specific.
Yeah.
And to get a clearer picture overall, we need to establish and fund crime reporting standards, including mandatory hate crime reporting for all agencies, and also create mechanisms to report white supremacist violence outside traditional law enforcement channels, maybe like national hotlines.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, for protecting our communities and strengthening our justice system. What are the key proposals on that front?
Well, the blueprint suggests we need to protect communities and prosecute crimes more effectively. This involves investing in public health approaches to violence prevention, disengagement, and rehabilitation, not just punishment.
Broader view.
A much broader view. It also recommends continuing federal funding for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, which helps protect vulnerable organizations like synagogues or mosques, but with a review to ensure equitable distribution and maybe some third-party oversight.
Okay. And on the prosecution side?
Prioritizing investigation and prosecution of white supremacist violence, giving additional resources to the DOJ and the FBI. It also suggests funding state attorneys' general offices specifically to combat domestic violent extremism and enforce existing state anti-militia laws, which often go underutilized.
Using the tools we already have, too.
Right. And the blueprint also proposes specific legislation to make our communities safer. This includes finally designating lynching as a federal hate crime.
Long overdue.
Updating the federal hate crime definition to clarify that bias only needs to be a substantial motivating factor, not the sole factor. Prohibiting racial and religious profiling by law enforcement.
And what about guns?
A lot on guns. Requiring background checks for all gun sales and transfers. Banning untraceable ghost guns. Prohibiting individuals convicted of misdemeanor hate crimes from possessing guns, closing that loophole we mentioned, and creating federal extreme risk protection orders, or ERPOs, to temporarily remove firearms from individuals who pose a clear risk.
That's a robust set of proposals, particularly on gun violence prevention. Now, what about directly addressing that deep infiltration we discussed earlier in law enforcement and the military?
Yeah, this raises that really important question about how we counter recruiting and infiltration directly within these communities. The blueprint calls for clear standards of conduct for law enforcement nationwide.
Uniform standards.
That's the goal, including rigorous hiring standards and screening processes designed to prevent white supremacist infiltration, alongside both local and national accountability mechanisms for discriminatory conduct.
And for the military.
Clarify DoD policies regarding prohibited activities, definitely expand mental health programs to include specific extremism disengagement services, and provide targeted training to separating service members about extremist recruitment tactics they might face, and also positive community resources available to them.
Proactive measures for veterans.
Exactly. And to put this in a broader context, another recommendation is to expand the statutory grounds for forfeiture of certain post-service DoD and VA benefits for those convicted of hate crimes or domestic violent extremism.
Taking away benefits.
Specifically limiting it to financial and honorary benefits, things like pensions or burial honors, not health care, to avoid, exacerbating harm and ensure vital support like medical care continues.
That's a key distinction. Okay, finally, what does this all mean when it comes to leveraging the power of finance and technology to fight this threat? How do those tools fit in?
So the blueprint calls for employing financial and technological tools and authorities much more strategically. This involves using Treasury Department powers like anti-money laundering measures, suspicious activity reporting, tax investigations to really disrupt funding networks, and even sanction foreign financiers of white supremacist violence.
Following the money.
Following the money. And on the tech side, it strongly encourages tech companies to proactively prohibit and demonetize hateful content, develop specialist teams dedicated to this specific problem, advocate for much more transparent content moderation and algorithmic recommendations.
Pulling back the curtain on algorithms.
Yeah, and conduct civil rights investigations into their own company failures when they don't adequately address violent content on their platforms, holding them accountable.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've seen that white supremacist violence is, well, it's not a static or monolithic threat, is it? It's complex, it's adaptable.
Highly adaptable.
It uses everything from subtle online algorithms to overt military-style training, and perhaps most disturbingly, as we've discussed, actively attempts to infiltrate the very foundational institutions sworn to protect us all.
Indeed. And the sources make it incredibly clear that while there are significant legislative and executive actions proposed here, a really critical factor for success is the will of the nation's leaders to act.
The political will.
Exactly. And a whole of society approach. It's really about moving from consensus on paper to concerted, transparent action on the ground.
This deep dive, it really reveals that the effort to counter white supremacist violence isn't just about policing crimes after they happen. It's fundamentally about safeguarding the integrity of the very system sworn to protect us, but from within.
Mm-hmm.
It truly makes you wonder, if this threat of infiltration has been known and documented for decades, literally decades, by federal agencies, what responsibility do we all share in ensuring these warnings finally translate into lasting, transparent change? Change that rebuilds trust and truly secures our communities for everyone.